Thank you. So I would like to start this talk with an image. In April 2015, a list of 17,000 migrants, mostly African, dead in the Mediterranean was deployed in the European Parliament to draw the attention of the world on this tragedy. But how to explain the ongoing drama? I believe that if we can understand today's migration, then we can try to imagine how it might look like in 2030. As we talk about migration, remember the original migration. Paleontologists taught us that thousands of years ago, humankind walked from Africa to populate the rest of the world. This scientific truth was possible because human ancestors enjoyed freedom. And at that time, what was important, that there were no frontier, no immigration policies. But unlike those times, today, migrants face closure of borders, restrictive policies, fences, walls, and even death in the Mediterranean. What is important to understand as we talk about migration is why, for Africans, despite those challenges, why are they leaving their continent? I would like to emphasize two factors that are not always being combined and explored together. The first one is an economic factor, an economic system which creates more unemployment and structural poverty in some African countries. As I talk tonight, 160 million Africans from 14 Francophone countries are using a currency created in 1945 by France. So during the colonial period, they are still using this currency today. You may wonder what a currency has to do with the illegal immigration. I will make it straight and simple. For 70 years, each African country using this currency has to deposit 50% of its national wealth in the Bank of France. Even today. They have been doing that at the expense of national economic investments in agriculture, in industry, in technology that would have created jobs for the youth of these countries. Hit by poverty and unemployment, of course, the youth, the great majority of these youth, takes the deadly journey toward Europe. The second factor is the deficit of democracy and its subsequent wars. When I ended up at Smith College in 2012 as a refugee scholar, I have never imagined that a simple election in my country, in Ivory Coast or Côte d'Ivoire, would have thrown me in the forest with my family, trying to find a safe place from Ghana to Togo, and then find a safe place in Northampton, Massachusetts. Like me, thousands of young men and young women, victims of violence and civil wars, like in DRC, in northern Mali, in South Sudan, are those refugees who are trying to leave the continent and who are trying to cross the Mediterranean. That being said, how can we imagine African migration in 2030? The truth is that from the original migration, the first journey, up to now, African migration has never stopped. Not even wars will ever stop it. Because Africans, this current generation, future generation, will continue to dream and look for a new and better life in Africa, but also elsewhere. But most important is that Africans, as the first human being, enjoy and believe in freedom of mobility. This freedom of mobility leads them to look for new roads, new destinations, like China, for example. Look, 50 years ago, there were barely African populations settled in China. Today, we can talk about Little Africa in China. One of the well-known is in Guangzhou. This trend to look for new roads and new destinations will grow toward 2030. It will even change the way we think about economic migration, because those Africans who are going or who will continue to go in China, they are not going there to look for shelters. They are going there to do business. Another important change that we are seeing on the continent is that 15 West African nations, Anglophone, Francophone, are getting together to create a single regional currency. This currency will make a huge change, a huge difference, because not only it will stop and end the exploitative economic system of the franc CFA, but it will generate more jobs, since some African country will not be putting their money in France. They will be putting their money in the economic sector and create more jobs. If, in addition, Africans can promote peace and democracy, then they will reverse the flows of illegal immigrants toward Europe. But not only African leaders, but also policymakers in this modern world, in Europe, together, if we can push these new changes that we are seeing in Africa with peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea, for example, and elections that were delayed for many times in DRC, for example, if we can push this kind of change that promotes democracy and peace, then we can make African migration a social and safe migration instead of the deadly journey that we are experiencing now. Thank you.